Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Keaney Gymnasium at the University of Rhode Island for the Rhode Island Interscholastic League Girls Division III Volleyball Championship. I'm Joe Koss alongside Neil Nachbar, an expert in volleyball in Rhode Island, not only as a coach but also as an official. Neil, today the Division III Championship will come down to two teams, Shea High School and Mount Pleasant.
Joe, both teams had to win on the road in the semifinals to make it here to the finals. Shea, they won at Hope in the semifinals 3-2. Mount Pleasant won at Hope at 3-2. And then Shea won at Johnston, which was the #1 seed, 3-1. So not an easy path to get here. During the season, Mount Pleasant beat Shea both times. We'll see if Shea can win on the third attempt.
Well, Shea, the 4 seed coming into this contest, he'll be wearing the black uniforms with purple numerals trimmed in white. And then wearing the red uniforms, that'll be Mount Pleasant on the right side of your screen with red uniforms, blue shorts, and white numerals. So we're just about set to get underway in the Division III Girls Volleyball Championship here on the Rhode Island Interscholastic League Network. And we'll see who will have the opening serve as they check the lineups and the rotations before we get underway. The keys for the game, Neil, if you had a look at the keys for both teams, what's it going to take to come out on top and be the champion in a couple of hours?
Well, I think both teams have to really dial in on their serve receive. So you want to get off to a good start with your passing, eliminate the errors as much as possible, keep the ball in play. Once you do that, then that just enhances your chances of winning much better.
Cassandra Zong will put the first ball into play, and we are underway with the Division III Championship. It's bumped up by Tati Tabaros, and she'll tap it over for the kill.
That time Mount Pleasant expecting the set. It didn't come. Instead, setter electing to tap the ball over right to the middle of the court.
So strategy being played out here early on in the opening point. Now the serve being thrown up by Taylor Logan, and it's bumped up in the back row. Now pushed over by Vananda Prack for Mount Pleasant. Bump on the far sideline by Nancy Lee, and then they try to keep it alive. Prack sets it up to the near side for Prack, Prack on the attack on that one. Couldn't get the ball to go down. The long ball into the corner, and they'll call it in. And another point for Shea High School for Sara Ferreira, a beautifully timed point, and she attacked it just to the far deep corner of the court.
She hit that ball as far as you possibly can and still keeping it in.
Logan to serve again. Dug up that time by Pisset. Ball tossed over, and it goes down for the first point of the game for Mount Pleasant. And the Kilties now down 2-1 in the opening set. Nancy Lee on the serve. Over the far side for Ferreira. Attack, kill. Ferreira strong in that roll up along the front side as the outside hitter.
Took a real solid swing there towards the angle. You're not going to really see either team as much of a blocking team at the net, so if you can set up a good attack, you're going to get a lot of free swings. That time we see a foot fault by the Shea player.
Carol Rodriguez on the serve. Now taking over for Mount Pleasant. Aaliyah Pinn, the captain on this team for the Kilties of Mount Pleasant. Ball put into play, bumped up. Now handling it is Ferreira. She'll set it. It's forced to be bumped over by Jennifer De Silva, but she couldn't quite get it over the net. It'll go down for an attack error.
Both teams serving well to this point. The only serving error was that foot fault that we just saw. So that's a good sign. Usually in the beginning of a playoff match, you might get some missed serves because of the nerves.
So Mount Pleasant, after going down early, able to even the score. Now at 3, Pinn puts the ball into play. Now she'll set it up at the line for Prack. Prack with the attack over the top. It'll go down for the kill as Rodriguez couldn't handle it, and it goes out of play.
That was a beautiful middle attack there. Good angle on it. When you attack from the middle, you want to try to hit towards the corners if you can.
Here's Pinn again. 4-3 advantage, Mount Pleasant in red. Ball dug up, sent right back over, kept alive. Pinn looking for Prack once again. That's a combination that they're going to use a lot this afternoon. Now over to the far side, De Silva with an attempt, and it's able to be kept alive. De Silva again pushing it over. Now Pinn setting up far sideline. This time she sets it up for Ganu Zong, whose attack goes into the net.
Like I said earlier, you don't see any blocking there. Both teams electing to drop off their defensive players and try to dig as many balls as possible.
Here's Prack, and Pin forced to bump it over. Goes into the back row, and it's kept alive. Bumped up by De Silva, and then tapped over and kept in play by Vieira. Far side, Prack pushes it over. Dug by Ferreira. Over to the far sideline, a swing by Ferreira goes just a bit long, and the point to Mount Pleasant.
That was an aggressive swing. She just didn't get enough topspin on the ball.
Into the game, Maria Ogunalani for Mount Pleasant. And she replaces Cassandra Zong as Prack serves it in the net. Lusara Ferreira, that senior, listed as a middle blocker. And back-to-back service errors. 6-5, Mount Pleasant on top, and Gadu Zong will have the serve now. And entering into the game, Brianna Williams, and we were talking to the coach a little bit earlier on in the day, a player that is new to the sport of volleyball, but plays basketball in the wintertime as well.
Yes, they have two tall players that are in their first year of playing, so we'll see how much of a role they play in today's match.
Ogunalani could not get that one up as the ball was directed low and went under the net, and Shea will get another point, and that evens the score once again. This time the score knotted at 6 here in the opening set of Division III. Girls Volleyball Championship put in play by De Silva into the back row, sends Mount Pleasant scrambling, but Pin forces it over to keep the ball alive for Mount Pleasant. Now far side attack for Carol Rodriguez, and it goes down for the kill.
Mount Pleasant did a great job of keeping that ball alive, a free ball with the players back to the net. Hard play to make, but Shea finds the opening right in the middle of the court there.
De Silva to serve, and she misplays that one for the error. Boy, didn't make good contact with the ball that time, but should be able to shake that off.
Right, that ball went off her fingers instead of the palm.
Nalia Pin back to serve. Once again, excuse me, it's Kim Pisteth serving this time for Mount Pleasant. Pisteth now again over to the near sideline for Williams with the attack. Number 14, other direction, Rodriguez puts it into play, and it goes down for a kill. So Rodriguez seems to be pretty strong on that front row when you look at the Shea offense.
Yeah, both teams swinging well. With the exception of a couple of missed serves, it doesn't seem that jitters are an issue here.
Gentle attack that time out of Rodriguez. Over to the far sideline, swung in by Ogunalani. Kept alive by Pin and then bumped over by Zong. At the front low, DeBarros setting up for Viviran on the near sideline. Here's DeBarros again looking for Vieira. And that time it'll go down for the kill. So Vieira, a couple of attempts and back-to-back swings, finally gets a second attempt to go down for the kill.
She got a little lucky with the ball hitting the top of the net and trickling over, but that was still a strong attack on the right side, that ball having to come across her body.
And she tries to carry the momentum with the service ace. That one went out of play, but it was tipped by the defense of Mount Pleasant.
Just deflected out of bounds.
And Vieira will serve again. This time the momentum will end as she serves it into the net.
She was standing well behind that end line when she served.
Maria Ogunalani heads to the bench as Cassandra Zong comes back into the game, and she will enter as a server for Mount Pleasant. Knotted at 9 here in the opening set. It's been back and forth volleyball here as we get underway, and a service error, giving the point to Shea High School.
We've seen some nice attacks, but neither team able to put a good run together yet.
Now Logan to serve. That one came across the top of the net. It was played up by Ganu Zong and ever so slightly rolled over the top of the net, landing on the Shea side of the court, and they just couldn't play it.
And Mount Pleasant with the overpass there, something that you don't want to do, but they got away with it.
Now serving Nancy Lee for Mount Pleasant. A big swing that time by Carol Rodriguez, but into the net it goes.
Rodriguez jumped a little bit early. She was on her way down when she contacted the ball, timing a little bit off.
Mount Pleasant now leading 11-10. And 11-11 now the score as Nancy Lee serves that one out of bounds and wide. Little lack of consistency in the serve so far. The first couple of points were back and forth, but over the past, say since the 5th or 6th point when it was tied at that point, we've seen really only about a string or two of points. No team really able to put 3 or 4 or even 5 points together at one time. Servers have maybe served a maximum of 1 or 2 times before turning it over to the other team, and that one's kept it close. Bumped over the net that time by Ferreira. Handled by Lee, and then Pin decides to push it over on the attack. Couldn't stagger the Shea defense for the point, though. Pin again. Now sets it up near sideline. Swinging on it is Zong. And trying to play it back over her head was De Silva, but mistimed it, and it hits the net.
During that volley, you saw a similar strategy by both teams. Both teams trying to be a little bit sneaky, set that ball over on the second contact, and both teams did a great job defensively of reading it.
One of the longest volleys of the match so far. Leah Pin on the serve. It'll get an ace as it clips the top of the net and then goes down to the feet of Carol Rodriguez, and she couldn't play it.
Yeah, that is a very tough top spin serve. That ball's coming in a hurry.
And Pin again. This time it's played by Ferreira. Bumped up far side, Logan pushes it over. Nancy Lee wanted it, but Pin will push it over the net. She misset that, but the ball stays alive. A swing by Piseth, handled nicely in the back row. Now Prack will set it up, and Pin will push it over on the attack. Second ball attack that time. Pushed over that time by De Silva, and the ball goes down for a kill.
That's a rare line shot. We haven't seen one yet today to this point. Mount Pleasant coach Carmen electing to call a timeout here.
13-12 is Mount Pleasant out in front, but interesting, when we were talking to Carmen earlier before the game, he said, yesterday in practice this team was very loose and very relaxed, and they said, well, coach, we made it to the title game. What more do you want from us? He says, I want you to go out and win it. And that's one thing that this team really has to keep in mind, is that they made the title game, but they're not champions until they win 3 sets this afternoon.
Absolutely. He doesn't want them to be satisfied with just getting to the dance. He wants them to go out, be aggressive, and go for the goal. They want to win the championship. Carmen is a very aggressive coach. He expects his team to compete every single point, and he's trying to get that message across right now in the timeout. There's no reason for that ball to drop. It wasn't a hard hit ball. He wants to make sure that they're covering everything. He knows that they have a great opportunity here to win the state title.
So that's the strategy there. We should point out with Shea, they've got a very short roster with them today. Only have 8 players, and that makes it a little bit challenging as well.
That's right. They don't have the luxury of having substitutes to go for in case someone's not playing well or if someone needs a rest. So these are the players that they came with, and they're going to have to get the job done.
And Shea will have the serve. DeBarros gets us back underway out of the timeout. Prack along the line trying to send that one in. Couldn't quite make the connection as De Silva now swinging on it, and she'll go down for a kill. As she was able to hit in the back row is actually Vieira along the far sideline who got that attack and kill.
There you see another attack going line. That ball a little bit harder hit.
Now Tati DeBarros. Prack swinging, hitting the top of the net. Now Prack is one of their lead attackers on this team, but she's not all that tall in stature.
Mount Pleasant really relying on timing and rhythm with their attack. As you said, they don't have the height, so they really have to make sure that their technique is as sound as possible.
That ball barely creeping over the net. Now Pin decides to bump it over, and it's played up in the front row, that time set by DeBarros. DeBarros looking for Vieira along the far sideline, and she'll get the kill on the tip.
Well, that ball sailed out of bounds, but the down official, Pete Renone, called a net violation on Mount Pleasant.
Subs being made for Mount Pleasant as Maria Ogunalani comes back into the contest, and she'll replace Cassandra Zong, who will head to the bench for Mount Pleasant. Now back underway, and that one, Elia Pinn trying to push it up over the top. One of those attempts to create a sneaky attack, but that time just couldn't get the handle of it.
That ball a little tough to handle for Ping. Shorter player will have trouble playing that ball when it's passed tight to the net like that.
Shea went 4 sets in the semifinal game. Mount Pleasant went 5. We're in the opening set here today, 16-13. And Shea is out on top wearing black, and Mount Pleasant on the right side of your screen in red. Pin bumps it up. Now this time looking for Piseth, and she'll send it over. It's kept alive that time by DeBarros, and she'll keep it alive on a second opportunity. Shea scrambling, and they'll keep the ball in play, and the point is going to be actually awarded to Shea. That one very close along the end line. The line judge right on top of it. But, boy, they had their hands full, and we've got a player down now. It looks like it's Tati DeBarros, I believe, who's down on the ground after that play. So that was a pretty wild scramble there for a time being. They had 3 players come together along the near sideline, and DeBarros obviously injured on the play, and now the coaching staff and training officials attending to her, and her teammates huddled around her to give her support.
Joe, DeBarros made 2 sensational plays in a row, both from the floor. She saved the ball over the net, and then on the second attempt, she saved the ball by digging it out of the net to a teammate. They were able to play the ball over, and the ball snuck in just inside the end line. Looked like the Mount Pleasant bench and the coaching staff disagreed with the call. We'll have to see the extent of the injury here. This is a referee's timeout, so Shea's not charged with a timeout here. You can see the trainer, Alan Segui, out there on the court speaking to DeBarros. Try to determine what's wrong.
And she will now rise to her feet, and so that's certainly very good. Look at the team going over there and giving her a nice hug. And she will hobble back to the back row, and she'll take the ball. So that's a good sign, because you look at the fact that you've got a short roster already for Shea, and DeBarros certainly one of the energetic players, and she was the one that really led to that attack and kill on the far sideline by Vieira, because she was able to, on 2 consecutive plays, keep the ball alive, and now she'll send in a serve that's kept in play and charges right back up to the front row, and she's right back in the game. DeBarros over the far side, Vieira, and it's going down for a kill as Gandu Zong just couldn't quite bump that one up in the right direction, and it went straight for the Mount Pleasant bench.
Well, DeBarros is all smiles now after setting that attack up to Vieira.
That's a perfect remedy.
Whatever pain she was feeling before, she seems fine now.
Now 18-13, and she'll serve an ace. Is just a little bit of miscommunication that time between Kim Piseth and Maria Ogundalani on the Mount Pleasant Kilties team, and they didn't know who was going to play that ball, and they let it hit the ground. That time Piseth calls for it. Now over to the far side, Prack pushes it over the net. Now set up there by DeBarros. Far side, Vieira driving a kill down for the kill. And Vieira strong in that outside hitter role on the far side of the net. And she certainly has this Mount Pleasant team scrambling.
Vieira's playing with a lot of confidence right now. She swung away on that ball. That was a hard-driven ball.
So Cassandra Zong will come back into the game, and heading back to the sideline is Maria Ogundalani for Mount Pleasant. Kept alive by Piseth. The ball is hit long, though, on the bump and out of play.
Last several points, you see Mount Pleasant playing a little tight here.
21-13, Shea out on top in the opening set. And DeBarros on another serve. We talked about not having a string of serves early on in this contest, but DeBarros, after that injury, able to put a string together that has extended the lead from 17 to 21, 4 consecutive serves before giving up that play at the net. Now
I'm sorry, Joe. That was a great run from DeBarros on the service line. After appearing to be hurt on the floor, she comes back and puts a good run together for Shea.
And out of Prack, the server now in the back row, as Ogundalani pushes it over. DeBarros looking for Vieira along the far sideline. It's dug up by Prack, bumped over by Pin. Now DeBarros, Vieira again. That's a combination they're going to look to use all afternoon. That ball kept alive that time by Vieira. Into the back row, Logan bumps it up. DeBarros for Vieira again. A swing, and she didn't get on top of the ball, and it goes right into the lower side of the net.
That ball set a little bit too far off the net for Vieira. She got on top of the ball, but but that ball needs to be a little bit closer to the net for her.
So Venata Prak on the serve. DeBarros again, Vieira. Taps it over the top, and it's bumped up by Zong. Pushed over the top by Olga Landani. And that time, Vieira's string at the front falls short. And Mount Pleasant will pick up another point, trying to get themselves back into the opening set. Now only down by 5, 21-16.
If you're Mount Pleasant, you just want to keep chipping away like they are.
The game starting to settle in a little bit here as both teams finally able to get a couple volleys going back and forth. Pin setting it up for Zong, who bumps it over. Goes to the back row, Logan. Now DeBarros setting for Vieira. And she'll drive it into the net again. And if you're a coach and you see Vieira make those adjustments, and very quickly we see the timeout called, this time by Christina Daly. And, you see Vieira drive a couple of consecutive balls into the net like that, and it's sometimes time to make an adjustment.
Yeah, I think what needs to happen there is you want to try to get the set a little closer to the net because you don't have the block to worry about. Mount Pleasant is either not blocking or their block is very short, so you don't have that concern. However, if the set is not there, you don't want to force it like Vieira has the last couple of times. You want to try to take something off it, roll the ball over the net, and then live to play another point. So you got to make sure that ball stays in play and then just play defense from there.
And a good timeout as well, because you had a point where you were an 8-point advantage if you're Shea over Mount Pleasant. Now the scoreboard looks a little different, 21-17. And when you're at the championship game, winning the first set really is something that you want to do, so that way you get off and kind of ease the nerves a little bit.
Well, I think for Shea, they can put a lot of pressure on Mount Pleasant by winning this first set because Mount Pleasant beat them twice during the season. They are the higher seed. So if Mount Pleasant was to go down the first set, that would put a little bit more pressure on them. I think Shea is playing like they have nothing to lose. They're the underdog in this match. Mount Pleasant hasn't really established their rhythm yet.
So Venata Prak back to serve out of the timeout as Mount Pleasant trying to reduce some of the damage that was done over the string while DeBarros was serving. DeBarros looking for Vieira along the far side. Again, the attack over the net that time. Dug by Pin and pushed over by Piseth. Here's DeBarros, a sneaky attack, back row handled by Lee. Ogadalani pushes it over. That one played at the net. DeBarros didn't quite get under the ball enough and couldn't tap it over with the right hand and gives up the point.
That ball a little too close to the net for DeBarros.
Here's Prak again. They've cut the lead down to 3 now, has Mount Pleasant in the Kilties. Vieira now setting for the near side, and Ferreira, who missed times and fires it into the net. So all of a sudden, Mount Pleasant is right back into this one, only 2 points behind, 21-19.
They're doing their damage with Prak from the service line. She's one of 3 players on the Mount Pleasant squad that have played for 4 years.
Good serve. DeBarros for Vieira. She'll gently attack it over. Bumped back over by Zong. Now DeBarros looking outside for Vieira. Into the back row, bumped up by Lee for the dig. Now Ogundalani with a left-handed tap over the net to keep it alive. DeBarros, Vieira, far side. Good height on that ball. Has that confidence back with that swing, and Lee couldn't handle it.
Yeah, she got up high there, perfect timing, took a good rip at it. Vieira getting plenty of looks.
Well, Mount Pleasant was able to cut the lead down to as little as 2, but now it's 22-19, and the margin for error reduces some more as Ferreira puts the ball into play. Back row, it's played by Lee, pushed up ahead by Pin, and then Pisteth sends it over. DeBarros tapping it over with the right hand. Back up for Pin, who sets Ogundalani on the near side, and it's dug by Ferreira in the back row. Lee with the dig. Now Pisteth bumps it over the net. Logan handles it. DeBarro looking for Vieira, couldn't connect, but it was kept alive by De Silva. Here's Vieira again. De Silva to bump it over. Ogundalani now for Pin. Back to Ogundalani with a hit over the top and scores in the middle as Logan couldn't quite get there in time.
A little unorthodox by Ogundalani. She jumped off 1 foot. Normally you see the hitters jump off 2 feet, but it worked.
Back into the game is Brianna Williams for Mount Pleasant. Sending to the bench is Nancy Lee. Now on the serve, Ganu Zong. Over to the far sideline, Logan couldn't quite get it over the net. Out of position on that, had a running jumper at it and just didn't have the momentum to be able to turn her body in the right direction and put an effective swing on that ball.
Mount Pleasant with their 2 tallest players in the front row here.
Well, the ace goes down as Kendra Vieira misplays that for the service error. And just that quickly, all of a sudden, it's tied at 22.
Well, that's a good timeout by Coach Chris Daly. You want to make sure you call that timeout without the other team overtaking you on the scoreboard. Mount Pleasant with their 2 big hitters in the front row, 2 tallest players. We'll see what they can do here. Shea trying to break the momentum.
Now, as you watch this game, Neil, where does the breakdown come for Shea? I mean, if you watch them have an 8-point lead, they come back after, Tata DeBarros was down on the floor, appeared as though she was in some pain, but came right back up and then served a string of 5-6 points to give them an 8-point lead. And now all of a sudden, you're back to 22, and that momentum swing, just as quickly as you got it, just all of a sudden just disappeared.
Overall, Shea has done a nice job on defense. What they've had a problem with is when they've passed the ball too tight to the net. There have been several points that have been scored that way, I would say at least 5 or 6.
Zong on the serve, bumped over the net by De Silva. Played up by Prack. Now Williams pushes it over. Front row dig that time by De Silva. Tapped over the top by Vieira in the middle for the kill. 23-22, Shea on top.
She's been the go-to player for Shea all set, doing most of her damage on the outside, that time on a middle attack.
Here's Jennifer De Silva. Over the top, dug by Pratt. Tapped over by Pisseth. Pisseth again goes right over the net. Vieira with the dig. Pushed over from the back row. Now Pin looking for Williams with a big swing on the left side. That one pushed from the back row by De Silva. It just didn't get under the ball enough, and it goes into the net.
Well, even though Williams' hit didn't go directly to the floor, it did put pressure on Shea's defense.
23 all. And Kim Pisseth now has her opportunity to serve. Vieira now along the near sideline, and Pin keeps it alive. Pisseth passing for Pin, who bumps it over the net. Logan with the dig, now far sideline. It's pushed over by Rodriguez. Pin looking far side now for Ogundalani, and it's kept alive. Pin, Ogundalani again. Far corner, beautiful dig that time by Ferreira to keep it alive. The ball was behind her when she got a hold of it, and it goes out of play on the near sideline, and we're knotted at 23.
Breakdown there in communication with Shea. You saw 2 players going for the same ball.
24-23. Mount Pleasant now come from behind with a chance to win it right here. Kim Pisseth. Tapped over the top that time by Tati DeBarros. Vieira says, I don't think so.
A tremendous hit that time from Vieira on the right side. So she's done it from all angles. She's done it from the outside, middle, and the right.
Well, 24 all, and Vieira keeps Shea alive. Sends it up over the top for the ace.
A beautiful float serve that time.
Wow, just that quickly things change. Now Vieira again. This time set point Shea. Over the top. And 2 consecutive aces out of number 8, Kendra Vieira, will give Shea High School the victory in the opening set, and it's all about Vieira here in set number 1.
She's done so much damage in this first set with the attack and from the service line. Shea, to this point, riding the arm of Vieira. Mount Pleasant, they've got to pick it up on serve receive and on defense. They are getting some nice attacks. They're playing some scrappy ball, but that's not how you want the game to end if you're Coach Kamen. Shouldn't be getting ace like that. Last 2 points. They have a lot of talent on that team. He knows that their players can play much better than that.
So both teams will regroup as Shea High School takes set number 1, 26-24. We'll be back with the second set in just a moment on the Rhode Island Interscholastic League Network. Well, just a little bit after 12:30 here at the Keaney Gymnasium at the University of Rhode Island, as we are in the second set of the Division III Girls Volleyball Championship between Mount Pleasant and Shea High School. Shea pulling out the opening set with a score of 26-24.
That was a well-played first set. When I noticed is both teams very familiar with each other. There were times where both setters tried to use the element of surprise, setting the ball over on the second contact, and Shea and Mount Pleasant covered up those plays nicely on defense. Familiarity definitely showing itself. Vieira was the key to that win in the first set for Shea. She was swinging away, had some nice angles, hit the line a few times. She hit the ball from the left, the middle, and the right very effectively.
Taya Logan to put the ball into play. And things are underway here in the opening set. Piseth able to keep that one alive. Now over to the far sideline. DeBarros tapping it over and setting it up. Over to the Mount Pleasant side. Back for DeBarros. DeBarros now forcing it to Ferreira, who bumps it over. Kept alive by Prack. Now Prack looking for it along the front row. A gentle attack. Try to get it to the floor along the front row. Pinned to Prack again along the far sideline, but put a little too much heat on that one, and it goes just long.
I like the decision on the play before the swing where she tipped the ball over, just tipped it a little bit too hard. If she dropped that ball right over the net, it would have dropped right to the floor.
Here's Logan again. Bumped over by Zong. DeBarros setting Rodriguez, and they're going to call a net violation.
Yep, that time Prack drifted into the net just a little bit on the block attempt. She's tying her shoes here. The up official did not see that.
So give Vinata Prack a moment to tie her shoe. Now play can resume.
That's right. Safety first, Joe.
Taylor Logan back to serve again, looking for her third consecutive point as Shea has jumped out to a 2-0 advantage, but they won't get it. As that play strategically placed over the net by Aaliyah Pin, and that was a play that you figured that Pin was going to toss it up and try to set Prack, as they've been doing much of the afternoon, but she decides to go ahead and attack the ball as well, and it goes down for a point. Nabarros now near side Ferreira, who pushes it over the net. Dug by Lee. Pin now looking far sideline for Prack along the middle. DeBarros to Ferreira again. She'll just gently bump it over. Prack again, middle hit. Dug by Logan. Played back by the Shea defense, and Prack goes right back at it again. Vieira on the dig. And playing it at the net was Ferreira, but mistimed the jump, and it hits the net.
Shea doing a good job on defense there, digging up Prack's hits a couple of times in a row, but unable to get the ball over the net.
Here's Nancy Lee. Bump serve. And driven in the net again by Ferreira. Now we've seen some different styles of serves here, and Lee has a style that's a little bit different than what we've seen using the underhanded approach.
You don't see that too often in volleyball, but for the most part, she's been able to get it in.
You see it if you play with me.
Whatever works.
Carol Rodriguez on the kill that time. For Shea High School, we're tied at 3. Second set, Shea leading 1-0 overall. And Rodriguez to serve. Off the top of the net, and, well, they got 3 hits out of it, but they weren't productive for Mount Pleasant.
Well, that serve was mishit. You could hear it from here that she didn't make good contact, but she got away with it.
And she'll get another one here. Rodriguez over the top. DeBarros setting near sideline for De Silva. Now Zong bumps it over. And that one very close to the line, but they will award the point to Shea, 5-3.
Well, we've seen a number of plays so far in this match where the ball was very close, an inch or two from the line.
Same situation there as that one played out of bound by Gnu Zong.
Lions people earning their money in this match.
And here's Rodriguez again. Pin looking for Prack, right-handed swing. Dug and kept alive, sent it right over. Pin again for Prack that time. You have to love the vision. Dumps it right over the top along the front row. Saw the breakdown in the defense of Shea and went down for the kill.
That was a great play by Prack. She took full extension that time, gets her fingertips on top of the ball, and tips the ball down to the floor.
Aaliyah Pin back to serve this time for Mount Pleasant, and it's bumped over there by Ferreira. Dug in the back row. Pin looking for Prack, bumps it over. Pin again. Pushed over by Zong. DeBarros looking near sideline. De Silva, who swings into the net.
Shea struggling a little bit to get on track here to start the second set.
Aaliyah Pin looking for her second consecutive. Dug in the back row by Rodriguez. And into the net, trying to bump it over, was Usara Ferreira, and she just couldn't quite hang on to it. That's the third play in a row played by Ferreira that has not made it over the net.
Ball control not as sharp as it was in the first set.
DeBarros electing just to tap it over. Pin, far side, Piseth with the right-handed swing. Dug in the back row. Prack with the dig for Pin, then Piseth again. DeBarros setting up De Silva on the near side. It goes long and deep into the back row, and trying to hang on to it was Cassandra Zong, but she couldn't quite get the ball to change directions, and it goes over her head.
To this point in this set, Shea has not set up a consistent attack. That time they were able to get the ball to De Silva, who took a nice swing at it.
Now Tati DeBarros back to serve. Big swing. Pushed over the top by Prack once again, this time along the near side, and she'll get the kill.
Prack not thrilled with that hit, a little bit mistimed, but it worked.
Heading into the bench again is Cassandra Zong as Maria Ogundalani comes back into the contest to join along the front row, and Prack serves it into the net. 8-7. Shea on top here in set number 2 of the Division III Girls Volleyball State Title game for the Rhode Island Interscholastic League. Usara Ferreira in the back row. Tosses up the serve, goes to the back row for Pin, who keeps it alive. Now Lee bumps it up to the front row, and it's pushed over by Pin. DeBarros, near sideline, Vieira, long and wide.
That time trying to go line with that shot, just misses long by about a foot.
Nancy Lee will head back to the bench as Brianna Williams comes into the front row. That's for Mount Pleasant. The attack along the front row by Vieira goes short.
Tried to go with the power tip there, but that ball had already dropped below the top of the net.
Ganu Zong on the serve this time for Mount Pleasant. Pin looking for Williams, takes a running attack. Dug by DeBarros. Now Vieira from the back row. And it goes long.
Another close play there. That ball barely missing the end line.
Ganu Zong. Piseth keeps it alive for Mount Pleasant. Vieira with a towering swing, and that time it is good.
That's what Shea needs to do, set up a consistent attack like they did in the first set. You saw them set the ball over the net on the second contact a number of times, but that hasn't worked.
So Mount Pleasant with the lead. In set number 2. Piseth off the serve, and Williams into the net. It's got to be nerve-wracking when you're Williams and some of the players on this Mount Pleasant team who don't have a lot of volleyball experience, and then the next thing you know, you find yourself in a state title game.
To be a first-year player and to be playing in the state finals, that's amazing. It's, it's uncharted waters if you've never done it before, but they're handling the pressure well.
Misplayed by Piseth at the front row.
Seeing a little frustration set in by both teams when they make an error. You make a mistake like that, you just got to shake it off, move on to the next point.
And those mistakes can compound themselves. Aaliyah Pin pushes that ball into the net.
If this continues much longer, expect to see Coach Kamen call a timeout.
He does not look happy along that far sideline. Pin setting up Williams. This time she gets a good swing on it, but it's dug in the back row. Sent back over that time by Rodriguez. Pin looking near sideline for Ogundalani. And it's tapped over and out of play by Pisset.
There you saw Williams take a good smack at the ball. Ogundalani had a good hit. Their top two hitters are their two tallest players, but neither of them able to get the ball to drop.
De Silva on the serve, and it's the second time today that we saw her serve a ball into the ground on her side of the net.
You had Mount Pleasant on the ropes there. You just want to keep that serve in. Mount Pleasant was helping you out by making some unforced errors. You just want to keep that serve alive.
Here's Kim Pisset. Serves to the back row. DeBarros setting up Vieira along the far sideline and blocked along the front row by Breonna Williams, but they're going to call her for a net violation and hand the point over to Shea.
Yeah, she just caught a little bit of the net. That's a shame because she was up there big, both hands penetrating the net as you want to do, but on her way down, she clipped the top of the net.
Tati DeBarros again this time with a service error into the top of the net. Mount Pleasant picking up another point. It's now 14-12. Shea out on top, and they lead overall 1-0. Back into the game is Cassandra Zong as she will replace Maria Ogundalani.
Shea was on a roll there for a while, but they've missed the last two serves short of the net.
Well, can Mount Pleasant counter? This is about the point where they strengthen their attack in the opening set and turn the tides on Shea. Problem is they had given up 8 points prior to that. That one tapped over the top, and the point going down for Vanetta Prack. And she'll get the kill. So now only 1 point separate these two here in set number 2, 14-13.
Prack, not a tall player, but she usually does something good with the ball when she gets the chance.
It is impressive to see that. We talked about that in the first set, how she could be shorter than you would normally have for a player that's your lead attacker.
There's where her experience comes into play. She's been playing for 4 years, and it shows.
Big swing that time along the right side by Carol Rodriguez for the kill.
Shea scored a number of points on that line shot in the first set. That time, again, wide open down the line.
Back row, Logan. Serves it to Prack. Now Pin looking for Prack. Stays in the back row to attack. Pin not electing to set that time. Goes over the top. Then very craftily played that time by Rodriguez to send it over to Williams, who wasn't really expecting the ball to come her way.
Right, she was a little indecisive. She tried to get the ball, get to the net and block, but a little bit late.
Pin for Prack. Over the top kill.
Boy, there she is again. Not a big player, but she's doing damage.
And on that play, the Shea defense maybe took a step, and that was it. Nobody reacted to the ball.
I think they expected it to come a little bit harder than it did. Prack didn't make full contact with the ball.
Nancy Lee is back into the game. DeBarros, far sideline. It's sent over by Rodriguez, but it goes long, and the point go to Mount Pleasant. 16-15, Shea out in front. And now Nancy Lee again to serve. Vieira with a bump over the net. Two Mount Pleasant players come together, but play continues on. DeBarros looking far sideline. Rodriguez who sends it over, and it is in on the far sideline. It was Cassandra Zong who was trying to track it down and thought that it was going to go out of bounds, and boy, Cao Men is not happy about that.
No, that ball was sent right over Zhang's head.
Pin for Zong. That's Gnu Zong in number 3. Cassandra Zong wears 11. She just bumped that ball. Now here comes Prack again in the middle. Into the back row, a diving dig that time. Beautiful by Vieira along the back row.
Great save there.
Pin pushes it over. Dug by DeBarros, sends it right back over for Pin, who sets it up. That time for Prack once again. Kept alive near sideline. De Silva with a swing to the back row. Cassandra Zong on the dig. Passed by Pisset. Bumped over by Pin. Back row Vieira. Now pushed up by DeBarros, who sends it over, and Lee keeps it alive. Over to the far sideline for Prack, and that's one of few errors that we've seen her made. I think she saw that there was a gap along the sideline, but couldn't quite get the ball to place where she wanted it to be.
That's uncharacteristic of Prack. She's done a nice job tonight of controlling the ball. That time trying to do a little bit too much with it.
Shea leading 18-15. They are in black on the right side of your screen. And Gnu Zong out of position, pirouetting to hit that ball over the net, and it wasn't effective.
Zong tried to play that ball with her back to the net. That's a tough play. Command calling a timeout. Wants to speak to his Mount Pleasant players here.
So with that timeout, I think it went a little bit longer than you and I both thought it would.
Yeah, you could tell that he wasn't happy on the sidelines, imploring his players to keep the ball alive, keep it in play. He was getting frustrated and finally calls the timeout, but you're right. I thought he was going to pull the trigger a little bit quicker on that.
So now 19-15. Now in the first set, what happened was Shea went on a very similar run, and the lead was 21-13 at one point. But after a timeout, Mount Pleasant was able to come right back into the game. At one point, knotted it up at 24 before giving up two aces by Kendra Vieira at the end of the first set, causing them to lose the set. So can Mount Pleasant mount a similar charge and do the two situations compare at all?
Well, they most certainly can come back in this game. This is far from over. Vieira had a great first set, but she hasn't really been the reason why Shea is winning in the second set. Mount Pleasant has committed numerous unforced errors, resulting in easy Shea points. So Mount Pleasant just got to do a better job of keeping the ball alive, keeping it in the court. They've sent a lot of balls out of bounds, and Shea just hasn't had to work as hard as they did in the first set for this lead.
Well, Shea, too, I've noticed that their defensive specialists have really stepped up here in the second set as well.
They've made some nice diving plays, which I think has caught Mount Pleasant a little bit by surprise.
So on the serve, it'll be Tati DeBarros, who's been an effective setter for Vieira all afternoon long. And now we're going to check the rotation here, I believe, as Chris Daly conferring with the official down on the floor.
Coach has the right to ask the scorekeeper if they have the right server. You always want to make sure so that it doesn't cost your team a point.
That's a good thing, yeah.
Yeah, it turned out they did not have the right server, so that saved Shea a point right there.
Now, as an official, if she were to go ahead and serve, they would lose those points.
That's right.
And the serve at that point.
Yep, Shea was out of rotation. They were able to fix it by asking the official scorer.
So a good heads-up play by head coach Daly, and Shea will earn another point. Now 20-15 as Prack sends that one out of play.
Anytime you're not sure, it's always a good idea to ask and have your rotation set correctly.
Well, Carol Rodriguez on the serve, Lee with the bump, pin, pushing it over for Prack. A gentle attack again, dug by Logan. DeBarros looking for De Silva, and De Silva gets it to go down for the kill. Not sure whether or not there was a bit of contact by Gnu Zong, but it looked like the ball was in bounds regardless.
That time a good top spin roll shot landed between the front row player and the back row player.
And Rodriguez sends it into the net.
She didn't make good contact on that. You want to make solid contact using your palm. The ball hits the fingers, it's just not going to come off the hand hard enough.
Well, Shea had the opportunity to continue to do some damage on the scoreboard, but they'll allow Mount Pleasant a little bit of daylight to sneak back into it, and they'll take advantage of it on the first serve with Aliyah Pin sending in an ace. And that's tough, too, because you just made a service error yourself, and now you pick up a receive error if you're Carol Rodriguez.
Yeah, there are many times in volleyball where you see if a player makes an error, they might still be thinking about it in the back of their mind. You've got to shake it off.
She's going to make two in a row. And the Shea team goes scrambling. That ball tipped so far in the opposite direction that the only one still standing on the inbounds part of the volleyball court was the setter and Tati DeBarros. All the other five players were back scrambling for it, and Chris Daly says, all right, let's huddle up here. We're up by 3. Let's make sure that we win the second set.
Well, that's good hustle by Shea to pursue the ball in their gym, which is probably the smallest high school gym in the state of Rhode Island. They wouldn't have had that luxury. That ball would have bounced off the wall. But you see Shea hustling. Right now, Mount Pleasant is doing a great job of keeping their serve in. I don't know if it's intentional, but if you can serve to a player that just made an error, that's great strategy.
So Chris Daly trying to rattle the troops, see if they could pick up the win in the second set. The first set went to extra points, 26-24, as it was back and forth for a majority of the opening stages, probably up through about the 11th point and went back and forth. And then Shea opened up a pretty good lead, similar to how they did here in the second set. And Mount Pleasant was able to tie it up at 24 before Shea took the win.
You see a contrast in coaching styles here during the timeout. Chris Daly is more soft-spoken, comment, gets fired up. He was standing right in the middle of all his players, imploring them to pull this game out. Chris Daly and Comment have known each other for a long time. They actually went to college together 16 years ago.
And see each other quite frequently.
Yes, they both teach in the city of Providence.
That's going to make Monday morning hard for the loser.
That's right.
Cassandra Zong could not handle that one. No, 22-18 as Shea tries to put the period on a second set. Get another victory here as DeBarros sends that serve wide for the error.
Looked like she rushed it just a little bit. You want to take your time from the service line.
And there's other things that Shea is possibly giving up that could hurt him in the long run. If they win the second set and able to pull this one out here, you'd have to be able to knock those off the scoreboard. But you hate to give up those easy points when you've got a 3-point lead at this close to the end of the set.
Shea's had a chance to pull away, but they've missed their last two serves. Got aced a couple of times.
Gnu Zong to bump it over that time for Mount Pleasant. Near sideline, Vieira firing a shot that goes down for a kill, and Prack putting her hands on her head as she was not happy with the way she handled that dig.
Prack, the seasoned veteran, felt like she should have came up with that play.
And if you're Prack, there's got to be a lot of pressure because you know that you're the player to go to. Oh, Lee, indecisive. Lee knew that one was going to go a little bit long if she didn't touch it, but instead of stepping left or right, she stepped back and the ball caught her right on the hand.
Her first notion was to use her forearms, then she decided to use her hands, couldn't get the hands up quick enough.
Usara Ferreira trying to serve for the win here in the second set. Logan bumps it up, tapped over that time by DeBarros. Set pin for Prack, who dumps it over the top. Is it in? No, it's not, and the point will go to Shea.
I think that ball was called in.
Okay.
Just barely.
Well, the up judge had pointed that Shea had won the point. And now Piseth, or Gnu Zong rather, on the serve. Pin trying to keep it alive, and she will be called for a violation, and Shea will win the second set, 25-20, and now they go up 2-0.
Yeah, that ball ends on a center line infraction. Player steps under the net. Down official had no choice but to make that call. I'm sorry, Joe. This is big for Shea to be up 2-0.
And that's two sets in a row that Mount Pleasant has lost and ended the set on a down note.
Yeah, you know, if you're going to lose, you at least want to be feeling good about the way you're playing heading into the next set. Mount Pleasant knows that they weren't able to capitalize on those Shea mistakes. You saw Shea missing several serves down the stretch, but Mount Pleasant just didn't cash in. Shea certainly not setting up their attack like they did in the first set, and that game could have been Mount Pleasant's if they just had been able to control the ball better than they did.
So Shea takes set number 2, 25-20, and now they lead 2-0 here as we head for set number 3 on the Rhode Island Interscholastic League Network. Back here at the Keaney Gymnasium at the University of Rhode Island in Kingston, Rhode Island. The Division III Girls Volleyball Championship underway, and Shea leading it 2-0 as we head for the third set. They took the first set 26-24 and the second set 25-20. And if you're Mount Pleasant, you can't make any more errors at this point, Neil.
To this point, we've had an upset in the making. Mount Pleasant won both matches during the regular season, and it definitely looks like Shea is playing a little bit looser. They've made some mistakes, but they've been able to keep their poise. Mount Pleasant, on the other hand, playing a little tight, making some unforced errors. They got to come out of this huddle thinking that, all right, it's a brand new set. Forget about the first two sets. Get back into playing your game. They had a great season. They're certainly capable of coming from behind. This is no easy feat when you're down 0-2, but it happens from time to time, and Mount Pleasant has the talent. They just got to refocus here.
Head coach of Shea High School and the Raiders, Chris Daly, was a part of the championship team in 2006 as an assistant coach. They're on the verge of getting a title here as a head coach.
This is the first time in 3 years that we've had a Division III state championship. The last 2 years, Division III was merged with Division II. The only team that was in Division III prior to that was able to compete at that level was Central Falls. The rest of the teams had their hard times. They really struggled against the traditional Division II teams. The league decided to go back, form a Division III again, and it's really benefited all those teams.
So before we start play, Nancy Lee will be replaced by Breonna Williams in number 14 for Mount Pleasant, who joins along the front row. And the ball is put into play as the opening serve taken and scored upon by Shea High School. Nope, they're going to give a net violation against DeBarros along the front row, although the ball did go down.
That was tough to see from up here because we didn't notice the net move at all, but DeBarros tried to make a nice play, just barely touched the net.
And they were right on top of it down below. DeBarros looking for Rodriguez, who taps it over. And it's in for the point. That one mere inches inside the end line.
Boy, I don't know how many of those balls that we've seen today that have dropped in by an inch or two or missed by an inch or two.
Taylor Logan back to serve. We're tied at 1 apiece here in the third set, and what could be the final set if Shea comes out on top. Swinging on it is Vivi Sayasine, who's making an appearance into the game here in the third set.
When you're up 2-0 as Shea is, you just want to keep that ball alive, keep the serves in.
Sayasine bumps it and sends it right up over the top. Rodriguez does the same. Williams misplays it, but Pin keeps it alive. Sayasine pushes it over to the back row, Doug, and set over to Ferreira, who sends it over the top, and Williams could not redirect it, and Shea will get the point.
Williams contested that attack, but unable to come through with the block. Ball went right through her hands.
3-1, Shea on top. Logan to serve. Into the back row it goes. Piseth to Pin, who attacks. DeBarros sends a high set, and it's pushed over by Viero from the back row. Attacked again on the set. We see a couple of second ball attacks as Sayasine sends that one out of play, and that has impacted the strategy of this game as we've seen it play out.
Well, you're seeing some unforced errors by Mount Pleasant's inexperienced individuals out there. There a double contact called on Williams. You could tell that she's a gifted athlete. She's a basketball player. She's just green. She just doesn't have the experience.
Well, Mount Pleasant going down early here in the opening set, 5-1. Pin looking for Sayasine, who fires it into the net. And if you're in the position of Vivi Sayasine, you haven't seen a lot of playing time so far, and you come into a game where your team is down 2-0, and all of a sudden you've got to try to create some magic, and that's hard to do after sitting and watching for about an hour.
Very nerve-wracking. You don't want to be the player to cost your team points. So instead of thinking of how you can score, you tend to think, I don't want to mess up.
And Gnu Zong that time plays that one wide of the antenna. And 7-1, Shea out in front, and things starting to unravel a bit here for Mount Pleasant. And in the back row, Cassandra Zong unable to hang on to that, as Logan will get the serve. And boy, what has Logan been serving for? What, 6 consecutive points at this point?
Yeah, she's not doing anything too special with it, just controlling it, keeping it in towards the middle of the court.
She's really doing nothing more than putting the ball in play.
That's what she needs to do. She's doing a great job.
Pin with the attack that time for Mount Pleasant, and then Rodriguez sends it over. Sayacine to Pin, and then Sayacine forced to just bump it over, but they're going to call a violation. Was it a net violation against Pin that caused the violation?
It was. That was a late call, but it was the correct call. Her momentum took her into the net. You could tell by the facial expression. She knew it right away.
9-1. Shea on top. And a service receive error by Gnu Zong.
Mount Pleasant could use a timeout here, settle things down. They're playing so tight.
ComEd's approach is interesting because I would have called one by now if I was a coach. But then again, Cassandra Zong with the error, and finally we get the timeout for Mount Pleasant. Not sure when you go down 11-1 at this point in the contest why you would wait that long when you could see that your team was back on their heels.
Yeah, I think that ComEd, not that I'm a mind reader, but I think between games he probably said everything that was on his mind, what they needed to do to get back into the match. And I think he expected them to come out playing much harder, much better than they did. Very disappointing at this juncture to be down by such a deficit. They're not even moving their feet right now on serve receive. And you can tell that by the body language, they're all hanging their heads. They're discouraged. Their arms are crossed. They got to come out of this timeout ready to play, refocused. They did not make the adjustment between games, unfortunately.
On the other side of the court, you see Shea High School huddled around Chris Daly, and right now they're just focused on continuing to do the little things right, and that's what's got them to this point.
Yes, the key for Shea right now is just to continue to get the serve in. They're doing a great job with that. If the ball does come back over, you just want to control the pass, get the ball to the setter. You don't need to do anything special. You don't need to take any chances with such a big lead. It's unlikely that your opponent's going to go on a long run. If you can minimize those stretches, you have a great chance of wrapping this match up in 3 sets.
Here's Logan, who's been tremendous on the serve in this third set. Already out of the timeout, Mount Pleasant playing with much more enthusiasm and energy. Is that enough to get him back into the game? Pin sends it up over the top. DeBarro setting far sideline Rodriguez. And her attack was brought up by Mount Pleasant in the defense. Here's DeBarros again for Ferreira. Bumps it over the top, dug up by Zong, Gnu Zong. And now Williams with a powerful attack over the top, and she will get the kill. So you see out of the timeout that Mount Pleasant, we're playing with a renewed sense of energy and urgency, and it showed up with that towering drive, that time by Brianna Williams.
Yeah, that was by far Williams' best attack of the match. That's what Mount Pleasant needs from her when she's in there.
Now Nancy Lee into the game with a bump serve. That one nearly misplayed that time by Rodriguez, and pushing it over the top was DeBarros, but she caught the net. No, they're going to call her for a carry.
Looked like the ball was going to go in Shea's favor. That was a delayed call, carry called on Shea. Felt that the ball was lifted.
Venata Prak back into the game, as headed for the bench is Vivi Sayacine.
Prak needs to bring some of that senior leadership for Mount Pleasant.
And you need her in the game. Absolutely need her in the game. Shea gets the kill, 12-3 here in the third set. Carol Rodriguez back to serve. Puts the ball in motion to Seth. That one heads backwards. Cassandra Zong rights the ship, and then it's sent over by Pin to keep it alive. DeBarros looking far sideline, this time De Silva with a towering swing. Goes into the back row, dug by Cassandra Zong. Pisteth looking for Prak, puts it over the top, blocked at the front row by DeBarros. DeBarros setting far sideline for De Silva. Logan with the dig. DeBarros on the attack. Here's near sideline Cassandra Zong. Over the top. Dug by Piseth. Zong again. And that one went just wide. The linesman down here on the right side calling that is Gnu Zong on the near sideline. Just sent that one wide of the antenna.
Yeah, linesperson all over that call. That was the correct call. Ball across the net outside of the antenna.
Shea up by 9, 13-4.
Joe, that might have been their first missed serve of the set. I don't remember them missing too many serves so far.
Well, when you have Taylor Logan serving for 10 straight points, and she was tremendous, helped build this lead. Rodriguez. Here's Prack with a big swing. Rodriguez with a dig. Lee passes for Pin, now far sideline for Gnu Zong. Dug in the back row by Vieira. Here's the attack by De Silva. Clips the top of the net, then goes back row. They'll fight for it, and Pin and Lee combine to get it over the net. Here's De Silva with a towering swing that goes long.
That was the best volley of this third set here. Both teams playing good defense. We saw a good attack by Prack. Nice defense, nice dig by Shea. That ball just going a little bit long.
Well, Cassandra Zong will head for the bench as back into the contest again, Maria Ogunalani. She's got some bright shoes out there.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. I don't think they wanted Ogunalani in the back row.
But they were already committed at that point, and now you're right, they're going to make that change once again.
Yeah, they got away with it because Shea wasn't able to get that ball over the net, but they made that substitution one rotation early there.
So Zong comes back in, and Ogunalani goes back to the bench. And Pin on the serve. Kim Piseth sends it over to Gnu Zong, but the ball was well out of play already, and she couldn't turn the corner.
She had to chase that ball out of bounds and then ended up with her back to the net. Difficult play.
Prack with the attack. Dug in the back row by Rodriguez. Gnu Zong calls for it, and everybody allows her to have it. Big swing far sideline by Vieira, and she can't quite get it over, and it'll be a double hit.
Prack's had a couple of real hard-driven balls that just have not been able to find the floor, but she's playing aggressive.
Let's see how she could do with the serve, if she can spark her team offensively with her serve. Vieira comes up with a dig. Back row attack by Rodriguez, and she sends the ball just about straight up instead of forward.
That was a tough serve by Prack. That's what you need. That calls a timeout by Shea. Try to stop it right here.
Well, they had gone up 11-1 to open the third set, but now only lead 14-8 as they close in on trying to win their third set in the state title in the Division III for girls volleyball in the state of Rhode Island. The way they broke down, set 1, 26-24, set 2, 25-20 in favor of Shea.
Prack showing a lot of leadership out there from Mount Pleasant. We saw a couple of strong attacks that didn't necessarily drop, but it showed that she was aggressive. It sent a good message to her teammates, and now she's doing some damage from the service line. She needs to keep that up coming out of this timeout.
So again, as you pointed out earlier, you see the difference in the two teams as they settle in around their coaches. Chris Daly, very calm, cool, and collected. Shea walking out onto the floor again with a renewed sense of confidence, where Mount Pleasant, on the other hand, K-Men trying to really just get his team into it.
I like that decision by Coach Daly to call that timeout after Prack's first serve. Don't let her get on a roll before you call the timeout.
Here's the second. DeBarros can't quite handle it. There'll be another ace as Ferreira's bump was right in at the net and nobody could get under it.
I think she had a little bit more space than she thought she did. She let that ball go.
Vieira gets the dig, now passes it over for DeBarros. Back to Vieira, who swings and hits the net.
Vieira's struggling a little bit here in the third set. We saw that in the first set. She pretty much carried Shea to the victory.
Prack again. Vieira from the back row bumps it over. Dug by Prack. Front row Piseth. Excuse me, Pin was looking for Williams along the front row. It's actually Ogunalani along the front row. And it went wide. Shea gets the point, 15-10. And Ferreira with the serve, misplayed by Prack.
Serve receive has really plagued Mount Pleasant here in the third set. Their passing has been inconsistent. They're just not moving their feet.
16-10. Shea leading in the third set. Ferreira sends that wide and out of play for the error.
She was a little off balance there with her serve. Her body was facing the out of bounds. That's where the ball went.
Now Nancy Lee will head for the bench as Brianna Williams comes back in along that front row, and Gnu Zong on the serve for Mount Pleasant. Over to the far sideline looking for Vieira. A towering swing dug by Zong. Pisteth could not quite recover as the ball misdirected, and it was either going to be Williams, Prack, or Pisteth, and Pisteth couldn't send it back up.
Vieira crushed that ball. Zong did a great job of digging it, but Mount Pleasant unable to keep the ball alive.
Vieira's attack along that front row is tough to counter. DeBarros, now Vieira near side. A gentle attack. Prack redirects it, and she is frustrated.
That time the off-speed shot right to the middle of the court. That's always a tough spot to defend.
18-11 now, Shea on top.
They're starting to feel it.
DeBarros, back row. And that one trickles over the net, but it lands out of bounds. And Mount Pleasant may have just gotten the opportunity they need to be able to get back in this.
Mount Pleasant very fortunate that that ball didn't trickle over and drop in.
Here's Kim Pisteth. DeBarros looks for Vieira, and boy, mistimed the jump.
And she was early on that, hit the ball on her way down instead of at the peak. Mount Pleasant trying to chip away at the lead here.
Dug by Vieira. DeBarros back to Vieira, and she'll hit the net again. We saw that earlier, where Vieira got into a string where 2 or 3 plays in a row, she couldn't quite get the ball over the net. She had a couple errors and a receive error, and now all of a sudden we start to see the same thing again, but Mount Pleasant wasn't able to capitalize then. Now they're 4 points behind in the third set, trying to do so now before it's too late. Logan sends it right over. Ogundalani now along the far sideline with the attack. Pass by Logan goes into the back row, and it's pushed over by Ferreira. Pin looking for Ogundalani along the far sideline. DeBarros, now here comes Rodriguez, and she'll tap it over. Pin again. Ogundalani, and this time her attack goes into the net.
She did a nice job on the first 2 attempts. That time the ball was set a little bit short. She had to come into the court. Got there a little bit late. Wasn't able to get it over there.
So Kendra Vieira, who has been the star of the show for Shea High School today with the dig and the serve to keep the ball alive. De Silva passing, and forced to put it over was the setter of DeBarros. And Ogundalandi just has to return the favor. Now DeBarros sends for Rodriguez, who takes a towering swing, but it goes well long. And Mount Pleasant wins the point.
That was a nice set. That time just mistimed it by Rodriguez.
Maria Ogundalani heads for the bench as coming into serve is Cassandra Zong. Here's the serve into the back row. Brought up by Ferreira. Now Logan pushes it over the top. Turned around by Gnu Zong. Then tapped up by DeBarros, and an attack by Logan, and she was a bit off balance, but she had the Mount Pleasant defense back on their heels enough where they couldn't react to her attack.
Yeah, Logan has done most of her damage from the service line, which is where she's at now, but that time able to get the kill.
Here's Logan again. Into the back row for the ace is Cassandra Zong. Mistimed it. I think Pisteth had taken a step towards the direction of the ball, and Zong had anticipated that she was going to play it, but a little bit of a communication breakdown in that play. As Shea extends her lead, now 21-15, and Prack bumps it up from the front row, and now on the attack goes back row, but it goes long.
Good attempt by Prack. That was a nice swing, just a little bit long. Logan doing a great job, as she did earlier, just keeping that serve in.
22-15. Shea on top of Mount Pleasant in the third set. 3 points away from a state title. Pin setting Prack. Dug by Vieira. Rodriguez passes Ferreira over the top and goes down for the kill.
Mount Pleasant again a little bit slow to the ball. Shea is feeling it right now, very confident.
23-15 in what could be the final set of the afternoon for the Division III girls volleyball title game. Ferreira bumps it over the net. Zong for pin for Williams. Ferreira with the dig. Here's Ferreira. Over the top, Cassandra Zong gets the dig. Pisteth passes over to Pin, who bumps it over the top. It's nearly kept alive that time by DeBarros, but Vieira's dig was too hot to handle, and it goes into the net.
Yep, that was a nice attempt there. Previously saw a nice swing by Williams, who was subbed out of the game.
23-16, Nancy Lee with a bump serve. Sends it over the top, now set up by DeBarros. Near sideline swinging is Rodriguez, and the point being awarded off a net violation as Prack ran into the net in the middle.
Match point now by Shea. Logan has done so much damage in this set from the service line.
And Rodriguez serving an ace to win the championship. And Shea High School are the Division III girls volleyball champions.
Well, congratulations to the Shea Raiders. They really brought their A game today. They played great from start to finish. Mount Pleasant came in as the favorite, played tight, I thought. I thought they made a lot of unforced errors in this match. They know that that was not their best game, but Shea comes through when it counts most. You got to give them credit. Congratulations to the Shea Raiders, their first championship since 2006.
So Shea High School takes the title as they huddle up there on the court with Chris Daly in there as well, as she has earned a state championship as a head coach. The teams will meet at the net for the traditional handshake, but it is Shea High School who are the 2012 Division III girls volleyball champions for the Rhode Island Interscholastic League. They won it 3-0, 26-24, 25-20, and 25-16. For my partner Neil Nachbar, I'm Joe Koss. Thanks for watching the Division III Girls Volleyball Championship as Shea has won the title on the Rhode Island Interscholastic League Network.